Welcome to Live with Cami, everyone. This is so exciting. We are going to talk about an amazing history resource for you and your family to increase the love of learning and interest level. And we're going to talk about history in general and why. Why does it get such a bad rap? I mean, really, it really does. And it's super sad. I've fallen in love with history again over as an adult, and it is absolutely so exciting. I mean, I always kind of was interested in the like relative use, the use for, wow, that's amazing, because I was really brought up with a lot of culture, but it's something that we have to know. And I have Jared from the Daily Bellringer, who's going to share with us today about this awesome resource. And I am super excited for you guys to listen to this. And he's going to share with us all his information. So for those of you that don't know, and those of you who are watching us on a replay or brand new to our group or YouTube, the Freedom Scholar, and I'm Cami Wanis from the Freedom Scholar. The Freedom Scholar is an educational mentoring service, and we mentor youth and adults in all different types of education: homeschooling, unschooling, private schooling, public schooling, and charter schooling, whatever you're doing that is going to help you increase the love of learning, troubleshoot, transition between types of learning, and just make your family's educational journey, make it so it's a whole, complete family experience, and that it's going to get you to where you want your kids to go. So that is super exciting. If you have questions, you can visit our website at www.thefreedomscholar.com, and we do all kinds of mentoring services, and we also have a brand new program called the Young Statesman, Young Stateswoman Society. But I would like to talk today about Jared. I was absolutely blown away because I found his resource, the Daily Bellringer, on a thread on Facebook, just advertising educational businesses. And it just caught my eye because, again, I love freedom, right? And I love history. And so that kind of caught my eye. And so I was like, well, let's check out these videos, because he has some amazing videos. And I was totally floored at how great they are. They're very professionally made, very well done. And they are succinct. They're very short in a way that you can get a good experience of the topic, specific topic. And then, but also it inspires you to learn more about it, which I really like. So Jared, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and like your background a little bit.
All right, Cami, well, thank you so much for having me on here with you. But my name is Jared Breuning, and for those people who are following the Daily Bellringer, a lot of people just call me the Bellringer guy. I've had some students that I've talked to in classes that are just like, "Hey, you're just the Bellringer guy." I do have a name. I'm Jared Breuning, and I think it's interesting the way you brought up as an adult getting into history. I don't know how many people I've talked to that always say, I wish I would have paid more attention when I was in history class in junior high or high school, because they become adults and then they realize how important history really is and how much you really need to know history. But I guess a little bit background about myself. I'm a teacher. I taught in a private school. I've taught in a public school for the past, well, over 12 years. I've taught everything social studies. I've taught American history, of course, geography, world history. Believe it or not, I actually taught a guitar class as well at one time. And so, I have a lot of different experience teaching different classes and everything. I guess a little bit about me personally, and my wife and I, we just celebrated our 17th anniversary, and we have 3 kids, all under the age of 9. And so we're kind of busy here around the house dealing with, as you can imagine, 3 kids under the age of 9, just a lot of things like that. And the funny thing is that my kids, they all think the Daily Bellringer, when I show them some of the videos, they look at it and they're like, wow, you're like world famous. They think that I'm like some sort of, worldwide known celebrity or something. And I'm like, no, you really, this is just for people to learn from. This isn't like some sort of, TikTok video or something like that. So they think that I'm some kind of really big deal. But yeah, I love history. It really is my passion. The more I've gotten into teaching, the more I found that is really what my passion is doing that. But also my passion is in technology as well. Actually, I have a master's degree in instructional design and technology. And so that's kind of what how this channel got born, is that I have a combination of a passion for history, but I also have some technology skills as well. And so I kind of combined those two, and kind of what ended up coming out was the Daily Bellringer.
I know. I think we need to have like a video editing, like, session or something with you, because you got some great. And so, let's just say, why does history get like such a bad rap? Like, what everybody says, oh, history, it's so boring, I don't want to, not everybody, but that's the general consensus. And how does it get such a bad rap?
I think, and again, I was talking to my wife about this, and believe it or not, my wife is not a history person. Actually, when we got married, she couldn't tell me the difference between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And so I've accomplished my goal in our marriage. She now understands the difference between the two. But I think that, with history, it's simply the way it's been taught. And I'm not saying that the old methods of teaching are wrong, but just the nature of history itself, it seems like it's a lot of rote memorization. And for me personally, in my classes, the way I taught was I didn't really focus on the dates. I didn't focus so much on the terms. I mean, yeah, there were certain terms I wanted students to really understand, but I really wanted them to understand the whole story. And I wanted them to look at history as being a story. And really the way that, honestly, the first day of class, when I was teaching, I would basically tell students like, what's your favorite, or I'd ask them, what's your favorite movie? And we'd talk about movies for the whole day, basically. And then we would kind of talk about how, well, if you think about history, it's really just like watching a movie, except it's a whole lot funnier, and there's more crazy things that happen in real life than happen in these fictional movies. So,
Wow.
I think that's kind of why history gets a bad rap, is it just seems like there's been a lot of teachers in the past that have just simply said, okay, read this section, answer these questions, read this section, answer these questions. But you really have to find ways to make history come to life. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, of ways to hopefully get students to be more engaged with history and everything. But yeah, I think it just gets a bad rap because sometimes the methods that we use to teach it aren't meeting the students where they are today.
Right. And I feel like, having been, a public educator myself, I feel like the textbooks are so damaging to any subject matter, because they are just like if you took the first top layer of skin, just like, that's all it is. It's just
Mhm.
a little like snippet and a little snapshot, and they're not the connections between events, especially in history and things, and it are not super obvious. And I feel like they don't necessarily, although they do get better at relating, to their lives and things. I feel like it's just a little snapshot. It's a little like, here's a Scooby snack, and then we got to move on because we're so busy, you know. And that's hard because you can't really get into the lives, you can't really read Dive and Frank while you're, doing a whole Holocaust series or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you've got to kind of like one of my ways that I would look at teaching history is that I give them a lot of details in the hopes that they understand the big picture. Even though I give them all these details, I don't expect them to remember all these, but it was kind of interesting to see the way to see how students would remember those little details and how they would tie those into like, oh yeah, well, that's why this happened, or that's why this happened because of this little tiny detail that I gave them, or some little, anecdote or story about some little goofy thing that happened in history. And then they would tie that in and help them to remember, the big picture of what was going on. So, and and I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with reading comprehension. I mean, that's extremely important. We need to do that. You have to do reading comprehension, but there needs to be a good balance between doing readings and then finding ways to have students engage with what they've learned.
Absolutely. When I was in college, I was a Native American Studies minor, and one of my instructors he was so funny. All he did, he was very much of a rascal. He was Native American himself, and 100%. And he just told stories for his whole lectures. He
Yeah.
talked about, he talked about like time periods and stuff, but that was more in like your own reading thing. He just came in and just told stories, and he told the funny, like he picked the stories that were hilarious. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the different things that the Native Americans would do to the missionaries while they were sleeping, or, like, like, so, like, wow.
Yeah.
those kind of stories. And then, those kind of things stuck with you and they stay with you and they make them personal. And you can kind of get into like, yeah, if I was in that situation, I would have done that too.
Yeah, that's exactly what makes it stick, is if you can find those things that you remember, those little stories that you remember and everything. So
Yeah, yeah. And so what is the big deal? Like, I know we've kind of touched on this already, but what is like those who don't love history and who don't study history, what is the perspective or what are they missing?
what you mean? What are they,
Like,
why
why
do you,
history? Why is history important to know? Like, what do we,
well, I mean, of course, there's always the old cliche, those who, don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Of course,
right.
I like the one I've seen recently is that, those who've studied history are doomed to watch others repeat it. That's of course, one of the
I
big things.
love
But,
that.
for me, with history, I think about, as an individual trying to be a well-rounded, educated person, is that you need to understand history in order to, I mean, just be that well-rounded, educated individual. And one thing that I would make an argument with my students about is, if you think historically and consider the advances we've had in our society or
Mm,
civilization, since education has become more, I guess, standard for everyone, whether it be in, public, private, or homeschool, think about the advances we've made in society or just in civilization. I mean, I talk about how, look at for how many hundreds or even thousands of years people were just riding horses. And then all of a sudden, within the last 150 years, it just a straight up shot of, we make cars, and then all of a sudden we're on the moon,
right.
and it's just, and you can correlate that almost exactly with when education really became something that was really pushed in our civilization. So, I say, being a well-rounded, educated person, is what's going to push our civilization forward. So again, it's important to know math. It's important to know science. It's important to know history. I mean, it's important to know all of it. So, the unfortunate thing is, in a lot of schools today, well, just in a lot of schools today, history is being pushed to the back burner. It's
Hmm.
kind of like, it's ELA, it's math, which again are extremely important. But, if you see again, kind of, where things are at in our culture, civilization, it's like, we really need to have that history in there. We need to have geography in there. We need to have those things so people understand where things are happening, why things are happening, how they
Absolutely.
relate to what happened before. So again, it's extremely important. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir right now, but it's extremely important to know history.
Yeah, this is definitely preaching the choir. There's some awesome, awesome, awesome families in here and awesome parents that are all about teaching history. And so, and when you mentioned the big picture and talking about, I feel like it's contextual. It's contextual, and it definitely gives us context for life and gives us, like you said, the big picture. And I know Stacy said the big picture is super important, and that is absolutely true, because I see so much in the way that freedom is lost today is because people don't have the big picture, and so they're not even thinking about the big picture, and they're
Mhm.
not thinking 10 years down the road. They're thinking about right now. So,
Mhm.
and I feel like history gives us that. It gives us a context, and how great to learn from other people's experiences instead of, there's that old story about letting your brother and sister put their hand on the stove and then you just watch it happen right
Yeah.
instead of you.
Yeah.
That was not me. That was my sister. She watched me do it.
Mhm.
but, but that's okay. So,
But you
yeah.
learned your lesson, right? So
Oh,
yeah.
we both learned it.
Yeah.
I just had the experience for her.
Mhm.
So let's talk about how we can make, and we already talked about this a little bit, but how can we make it exciting and interesting? So there are a lot of homeschooling families in here, but then there are also a lot of families in here that do all kinds of other historical learning. And so what methodologies, what things can we bring up for our kids to make it interesting?
Well, and I think, we'll be talking about the bell ringer a little bit later on, but I feel like the bell ringer is a good resource because it does that front loading that you need to do in order to then have the students engage in something. And it's kind of a simple way to front load them with information, because I feel like, the best way to engage students is, again, have them do some sort of, hands-on activity, or differentiate your, method of having them display knowledge. So, like for instance, like we'll talk about it later. Today's bell ringer was about the War of 1812 and the burning of Washington. If you had them watch a video, maybe afterwards say, okay, if they're an artistic student, say, okay, draw a comic, showing what happened with the burning of Washington. Or one thing that I found in the past few years that students really like doing is if I can give them some sort of like social media, like I create like a fake book page, or some sort of like Twitter post or something, and say create a post as if you were somebody living in Washington when the British were marching in to burn the city. What would you be posting? What would you be writing? And so, I think those little things like that are ways that you can get students engaged. So again, giving them choice in how they demonstrate their knowledge. And I guess I'll talk about, one really cool, ambitious thing that I did a few years ago with my students was we had just covered the branches of the United States government. And so what I had them do is I had them create posters. And, I know a lot of teachers have their students create posters, but they created a poster with the 3 branches of government. But then what we did from there, though, was we added an augmented reality level to it. I don't know if you ever worked with augmented reality. And unfortunately, the app that we used was called HP Reveal, doesn't exist anymore. But what they did was they drew pictures for each branch of the government. And then what this program would do was then they created their own like little slide describing what that branch does, everything. And then they could literally like hold their phone up to the poster, and all of a sudden all of their information would start popping out in their screen. And so it was like they could we put them all up around my classroom and everything, and the students just did a tour walking around the room seeing all this information popping out at them on their phones and stuff. And again, that if I haven't been able to do like augmented reality in the classroom for a little bit, but I think that's something that's really cool, that's kind of on the cutting edge, that you can actually have students like create their own like virtual reality or augmented reality stuff. So again, trying to tie in technology, because learners today are far more digital learners than we were when we were in school.
Right.
And again, I'm finding myself becoming much more of a digital learner. I'm still reading, but I'm not reading as much, because I feel like I'm learning a lot more from maybe different sources that are more digital sources. So again, I think that engages students more if you can find ways to bring in like technology and stuff like that into the lessons.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I almost forgot that it's been so long since I've been in the classroom. So it's been like 12 years since I've been in the classroom, you guys. And there's some things like creating that app. My husband teaches STEM and Lego robotics, so he does the augmented reality and stuff like that too, and all this cool stuff. But it's really interesting. It reminds me of how, like, I used to teach Shakespeare. We had a TV station, actually a studio in our parking lot in the high school. And it was half owned by the city, and half owned by the school district, so we could use it. And so I used to do Shakespeare in there, and we'd actually like, the kids would do the cameras, and do this whole thing. And so we used to do all kinds of stuff like that. I was like one of the first people to use PowerPoints and everything. And, back then, but I love that bringing in technologies, I never would have, having them like, what would you post if you were this person? That's a really cool way to get in the shoes of somebody else. And I really love, that biographies, autobiographies, and also field trips. I know that's something that doesn't happen a lot in public school anymore, but field trips, like if you're homeschooling, go there, like go to, the historical places. And we went to, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. So it was a fort. I didn't go there. My husband and my son went there while I was doing something else. But they went to the fort in Sacramento, and it was so cool. They got to see this whole, how the adobe buildings were, and all that stuff. And gosh, there is nothing more real than that. I know some awesome families do like they take their trailer, their RV, and they just go around the country and visit all these. That's a dream of mine, man. That's so awesome. I love.
Well, actually, that was something I was going to bring up, because for me personally, what gets me really excited about history is, sometimes after teaching for a while or doing this for a while, you kind of like, okay, well, here's another day of teaching history. But if you've got like a historic site near you or anything to go to that you can actually feel and touch where the history took place, that just, for me, it just, gets me going. And so like, here shortly, I'm going to be traveling down to a couple, Civil War battlefields. I'm actually going to be recording some bell ringers from some of these sites, and I'm super excited to go there. And like, I know that I'm going to get all jazzed up again for history, just simply going to those sites. So yeah, if you ever get the chance to take your kids or anything to any of those historic sites, and the great thing is they're free usually, so
Right.
it's a cheap trip to be able to go out and do that. So yeah, I would highly recommend going out and doing that.
Yeah, and even places like I remember when I was in New York one time, the New York City Library had a whole exhibit on. I'm such a book nerd. That's why I was an English teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had a whole like exhibit on the history of books, and they had like the teeniest tiniest little book ever made, and the biggest book ever made, and the longest sentence, and the whatever, like, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I spent like a couple hours in there just looking at all this. It was like a total sideshow to the library, but it was really cool. And you can see those kind of things at some of your local libraries as well. I know that a lot of local museums don't ever get visited, which is a tragedy, and they do amazing work at local museums. So,
and two, it seems like if you dig into your local history, you'll find out things like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this person, like, for instance, the small town I'm from in Illinois, if you ever heard of the 54th Massachusetts, who was not technically the first all African-American regiment in the Civil War, but if you've ever seen the movie Glory, it's all about the 54th Massachusetts.
yeah.
There were 12 guys from the town that I live in that volunteered for the 54th Massachusetts. They traveled from Illinois all the way to Massachusetts, and actually 2 of them are buried here in town. And so, like, I took my kids out to find their tombstones and everything, and then I come to find out Frederick Douglass came to my town to try to recruit for the 54th. And so it's like things, if you start looking into your like local history, I can almost guarantee you're going to find stuff like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this happened, in our history.
Yeah, I used to have my students do a history children's book. They would have to go out and research something about their local history and then write a children's book about it. And then we'd go to the middle school and they'd read them to the middle schoolers. So,
yeah,
or the elementary school, I think we went to elementary school. So yeah, so much fun stuff, and anything you can do to make it alive for sure, and make it relevant and touching and feeling, just like science. I feel like we do that a lot in science, but not a lot in history. So let's talk about one aspect of history I feel like is so important, is the idea of critical thinking about history, and the role of questioning, and questioning not just what history, is this like the real history, or is it, is it somebody's version of history, or what happened, that kind of stuff. And then like, well, not just about history, but how does that now relate into what we're voting on, what we're learning about in other areas, and that kind of different politics or different today's events. So, and critical thinking about that. So tell us about how like you would tie that in and teach about that.
Well, I mean, obviously, critical thinking is that's where you apply that history that you've learned. I mean, you learn all these facts and all this stuff just so that you understand, so that way you can critically think. And again, with my bell ringer videos, the last question that I always have, and we'll talk about those questions later, but I always have a critical thinking question with my bell ringers, because that way that, they have to try to apply or think for themselves about this historic topic. So, again, like I said before, that front loading is so important, so that they have that information, so that then they can make those decisions. So really, without critical thinking, you can't apply history to the present day. You have to be able to do that critical thinking piece with it. But it is getting more and more difficult, especially with as online, social media and everything's gotten bigger and bigger. It's tougher to disseminate what are you really getting. Is it real history, or is it someone's interpretation of history? And for me as a teacher, I try my absolute best to simply give the flat out, unbiased, politically spun version of history that I can. And so and again, I think that's one of the strengths of my channel that I offer, at least the resource that I offer, is that I try my best to do that. I know it's basically, we talked about it before, it's basically impossible to fully accomplish that, but I try my best to do that, to find sources that are, this is just the flat history, take it and you take it then and you know, decipher what you believe, you know, is the right or wrong things that have happened in the past, you know. So again, yeah, it's getting tougher and tougher to do that, definitely.
But what amazing skill too, you know, to take the Daily Bell Ring and take something totally different on the same topic and then compare the two and say, okay, why are these different and what about them is different, or how has that changed the message, you know, or like what, you know, changed the lesson of that event or whatever. You know, I think that that's that's so necessary in today's world. It's for sure is
definitely
being able to compare the different forms of media and different ideas about things. Awesome. So tell us about the Daily Bell Ringer. Tell us all about it. I know you mentioned a lot of things before, but I just love those videos and how they're like 4 to 6 minutes and they're just so succinct and they're little interest builders. So tell us about, like, how did you come about this Daily Bell Ringer idea?
Well, I guess I'll tell you the background of like why I initially started making these. A few years ago, I took a position at my school district as an instructional coach. And so I've been going into other teachers' classrooms, helping them, you know, do some of these technology things, especially. That's kind of been my area. But there was another teacher that I had worked with for several years, that she was an English teacher, and they told her, okay, you're going to teach history now. And she was absolutely distraught. I mean, I was literally on the phone with her and she was bawling on the phone about having to teach history, which I didn't see the big deal because I love history. But anyway, when she did that, I was like thinking to myself, what can I do to help her out? And so I started making short little videos saying, okay, just show your students this little short video and it'll cover the basics. And then you can go from there, you know, have them read a primary source, have them do an activity after they watch this little video. Well, then my wife says to me, you know, well, why don't you just start sharing this out for everybody to possibly use this? And so I have to give a lot of credit to my wife. She's the one that kind of said, why don't you start putting on YouTube and see if anybody else would be interested.
She's the big picture lady.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got it out there, and then now, you know, I mean, not like it's a huge blown up channel, but I have over 5,000 subscribers. It's interesting. It's fun because I'm in Central Illinois. And just like this last week, I spoke to a class in the Bronx, you know, through a Zoom meeting. And they were kind of like, hey, it's the bell ringer guy. And I talked to this class, and I got to talk to a class in Texas. I've talked to a couple classes in California and Indiana and Ohio. And it's just cool to see how technology now that we can actually do this. And I get a big kick out of it thinking, you know, when I'm sitting working on something at my desk, I think to myself, hey, I'm actually teaching a few thousand kids right now about, you know, the reasons why the Civil War took place, or the, you know, the Declaration of Independence. I'm talking about why that's important. So it's cool to get to think about that. I'm still getting to teach, even though maybe sometimes I'm not always in front of students. So that's kind of how it all got started, making these bell ringers. I guess, do you mind, is it okay if I go ahead and share my screen real quick?
Please do, yeah.
Let me see here. I'll share this screen. I think I'm on your Facebook page here. So I'll just go to the Daily Bellringer here. So again, it's youtube.com/the Daily Bellringer. And hopefully, can you see that right now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So again, the Daily Bellringer, I've got a little video here that kind of explains what it is. It's something that, you know, can be used in the classroom as, you know, a warm up for teachers to be able to, you know, kind of get things together for their class, but also, you know, for homeschooling. And I talk about that in my little introduction video. This is a great resource for you to use to be able to just simply have the summary of a big event, and then have questions that like go along with it. And if you go to my YouTube page here, you can see I've got all these playlists, and these aren't even all of them. I've got ones covering the entire, you know, U.S. Constitution, going article by article of the Constitution and getting into the background of the Constitution. I have all these different biographies, you know, sectionalism, things leading to the Civil War, westward expansion, the Civil War itself. I have all these different biographies. I have, like, you know, Women's History Month. I have several different videos about important women in history. I have a, you know, Black History Month one as well. Again, I have, I believe, close to 200 videos right now. And again, they're all between 4 to 6 minutes long. And actually, let me click on one here just to kind of show you what it looks like. My volume up here. Now, of course, unfortunately, you got an advertisement at the beginning.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. But let me skip this ad here.
Monday.com work OS.
So let me skip the next one too. I apologize.
That's all right. We know YouTube, man.
Okay, so the video basically, turn down the volume here. The video just simply plays, and I give a simple, kind of introduction saying, we're going to be looking at the burning of Washington today. And then I'll just start getting into what were some of the events, who was, what happened with the burning of Washington. And I try to do a lot of having, maps in there. So that way they get a geographic idea of where these events took place, like here on the Chesapeake Bay, where the British were attacking during the War of 1812. And then, of course, the British landing near Washington, D.C. And so I try to put a lot of that in there. And if you notice when you watch my videos, one thing for maybe some people who have been watching videos in the past, one big strategy that I try to do in my videos is having constantly moving graphics, because again, in my study of instructional design and technology, they talk about the fact that your viewer is going to be more likely to remember information and also just to be simply engaged with it if there's something that's constantly moving on the screen. So you can see, it's very seldom that I don't have some sort of graphic moving or I'm changing my position in the picture. It's like, for very short amount of time. But then if you scroll down here below the video and look in the more information, you can see I've got questions down here. And so down here, there'll be 4 comprehension questions. And then there's always a critical thinking one here. So like, for instance, here with the burning of Washington, after the burning of Washington, a lot of people went to James Madison and said, you need to move the capital somewhere else now. And he refused. And so then I have them think about if you were to, change where you would move the capital to, where would you move it to and why? All right, so they kind of have to think a little bit there about why would they move it to this new site. And so again, you can look down there for some questions as to, that can go right along with the video. So it makes a very, very simple little warm up. And, then from there, you can take this and maybe have them have a student read a primary source about, maybe somebody that was there in Washington, D.C. when it happened. But with a lot of these videos, like especially with like my Constitution videos, things like that, I have more resources that go with it. So I'll show you real quickly here. Here's my website called dailybellringer.com. And here again, I've got kind of a description of the channel itself. I do have an email list. If you want to sign up for the email list, you'll get updates, and I actually send out an Edpuzzle link. I don't know if any of your viewers are familiar with Edpuzzle. It's a really cool educational site that you can watch videos through, but I'll send out the link to that as well. But then too, if you're interested, like you go to the videos here, and this has got a lot of my different playlists here. So you can see I've got the early English colonies. Here's the growth of the colonies. But if you notice, I've got worksheets that go with each one of these videos here for the growth of the colonies. So if you click on that growth of the colonies, it's then going to take you to this full packet of worksheets that you can get that go right along with it. And they all have, you can look through and see what each one of them has. They have different primary sources. You can read different maps for students to fill out, some art activities, different things like that go directly with the videos themselves. And the cool thing, especially for homeschool students, if you notice, all of these worksheets have a little QR code on them. And so that way your student can simply just take their iPhone or tablet or whatever, scan the worksheet, and then the video will start playing on their device. And so it makes it like really simple. So that way you can just say to your student, hey, here's your little lesson for the middle passage, have them scan that, and it's going to give them the little 5 to 6 minute video about that information, and then they can go through it. So again, I'm trying to offer, there's a lot of stuff I'm offering here. I've got the videos again with the basic questions. The worksheets actually include additional questions that are on there as well. But yeah, so I'm hoping that it's a resource that, a lot of people are going to find useful. And again, if you go through and look through my playlist, like I said, I've got 200 videos right now, but I plan on adding more and more, because I'm going to be moving into right now. I've got through Reconstruction, and I've started getting into the Gilded Age. Then I'm going to get into the Progressive Era, then World War I, World War II, and just keep on pushing forward into the 20th century. So hopefully, eventually, I'll get all the way up to present day. So yeah, that's the Daily Bellringer. I mean, it's something I'm super excited about. I do spend a lot of my free time working on this. A lot of times when you see me do a video, it's usually at 4 a.m, because that's when I get up, so that I have some time before my kids get up to actually work on this. And so it's either at 4 a.m. or 11 o'clock at night that I'm putting these videos together.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Yeah, a lot of teachers are finding them useful. I've had a lot of homeschool parents that have contacted me and said how useful they've been for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love the fact that you are offering not only just the playlist in such a subject matter like, you know, order, which is great because some of, like homeschool parents, we not always like up on the order ourselves. So if they were
Uh-huh.
all random, we'd be in trouble.
Well, a
But
lot of this is just simply based on a lot of things that I covered in my class. And so a lot of times when I'm putting together videos, I'm just like, well, I covered this. I covered, the causes of the French and Indian War. I covered the advantages for the French and Indian War. I covered the war itself, and I covered the outcome. And so I would just that's kind of how I put them together, so they go exactly in the order that I would cover it in class.
yeah, that's super great. And I think that it's such a great tipping off point for whatever type of schooling you're doing. But definitely as a homeschooler, I know that for me, I would use that as an interest point and then take one area and say like, okay, well, like what about that was interesting to you? And then take that point and dig in, and
Mhm.
like really dig into that. And then that's how you can really foster love of learning in that area so that it's not just you coming up with like, okay, now we're going to learn, about so and so. If you just said, like that's what is, with homeschooling, we can be a little bit more, individual and say, what about that was really, what about that surprised you? What about this Thomas Jefferson guy, like what
Yeah.
about, whatever. What about Paul Revere? Well, imagine if you were him, like you had to like go, do all this stuff and it's totally dangerous. But take that and then dig in a little bit and dig in some more and go to the library, get some books, watch other videos, and do that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's my goal with these videos is I don't want to take the place of the teacher in the classroom or the parent at home. I just simply want to give the tip of the iceberg so then they can dig deeper to get into it. But one other thing I wanted to mention too is, as a history teacher, and I've been in the classroom for several years, I spent a lot of time digging through YouTube looking for educational material for my students to watch. And I'm not going to say that my videos are the best out there. There's some really amazing stuff that, has amazing production value and everything. But the only issue I had with a lot of videos that I would find on YouTube is, for one, either they would be like, half an hour long. And it's like, well, I don't
Yeah,
want something for my students to watch for half an hour. 5 minutes is about their attention span.
right.
And so I want something short. Two, I would run into a lot of videos that they felt like they had to tell so many jokes to make it interesting, and the jokes took over the history. And so you'd have these jokes that would just be going one after another that you would lose what you're actually getting after. And so my videos, I try to just be to the point. I don't really tell jokes in my videos. It's just a straight to the point history video. And then two, the sad thing is a lot of the videos I would find would have language that I couldn't have in my classroom and you don't want in your home with your student.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so my videos, I don't do that. I mean, that's not how I talk anyway. And so I'm just like, I'm not going to include it in my videos. And so again, it's a very family friendly resource, I guess I would say. And I suppose probably some people are wondering what age group is this kind of aimed at. I've had classes as low as probably fourth grade using my videos, and then of course I've had them all the way through 12th grade. I've even had some college classes that they've contacted me and said they're using the videos. So really, fourth grade, my kids love watching them. My kids are only, well, my oldest is going into fourth grade next year, but of course they love watching them because dad's in it and they think it's cool because dad's in it.
You're famous.
But yeah, but anyway, so yeah, it's a family friendly thing. It's a dependable thing that you don't necessarily have to preview it ahead of time. I mean, that's what I'm hoping, is that it's something like for teachers or, parents at home, that they're like, okay, we know the Daily Bellringer's not going to say these bad things, or he's not going to have, this type of information in there. He's just going to give the flat out history. And so, yeah, we can watch the Daily Bellringer video. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's a good resource for everybody to learn history.
Yeah, and I would even say, personally, as a homeschooler, going even younger than that, like younger than fourth grade, because it's just a little snippet, and obviously, review the subject matter so it's an appropriate subject matter. But it creates discussion, and even
Mhm.
if you just showed it and it was a discussion point, it starts bringing in that culture of, wow, we think it's interesting to study history and that it's relevant. So that, I think that's super cool, even if you didn't do all the other curriculum with it. Hey, I do have a question
Mhm.
from Stacy here. Stacy's an awesome mama, homeschooling mama, and she has a going into third grader, And she says she's considering trying out Story of the World, which I do know about, and for her third grader because of the storytelling element. And she says, do you recommend that curriculum? I don't know if you know
I'm not really
about Story of
familiar
the
with that.
World.
No. So
That's
yeah, I'm
okay.
not really familiar from it, but I suppose, if it's more like a story based thing, I mean, maybe my video might be a good thing, like even before they watch the story, just so that they
Mhm.
kind of know, like if they're doing a thing about Paul Revere, well, why was Paul Revere important? They could watch, okay, well, here's the one about Paul Revere's ride. We'll watch it real quick. Now we'll watch the story. So you have an idea, so yeah, it might be something. I think it's a good supplemental,
Absolutely.
resource, that
Yeah.
you probably have your kind of some core curriculum that you're going through, but you want something to kind of just flesh it out a little bit. This could be something that would really help out with that.
Yeah, and she had another question. So do you have any other favorite learning tools for elementary age?
One thing I was going to bring up earlier is we were talking about using technology in the classroom, and this is one that I haven't really had a whole lot of chance to play with, but I've seen some pretty cool things happen with it. I don't know if you ever heard of Flipgrid. It's a
I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
too
a
much about it though.
site where basically the student can record, just like we're recording right now, a little short video. So you might have a student who struggles with writing, and they can explain something to you far better than they can actually write it down on a piece of paper. And so they could record just like a little, their own little video, and it's kind of a cool little thing. So if you check out Flipgrid, that's a really great one. The other one that I used a lot when I was in the classroom, and I would think would work well with even third grade or even lower, is Ed Puzzle. I don't know if you've ever played around with Ed Puzzle
No.
before. Ed Puzzle is a site, and that's actually what a lot of people use the Daily Bellringer with. And like I said, I send out a link for that. Ed Puzzle makes it where you can take any YouTube video and you can insert questions in there, and it'll stop the video at the point where you say to stop it, and then the student has to answer the question. You can do multiple choice questions, but you can do open-ended questions as well. And then it's kind of a neat way to have it keeps students accountable that they actually watch the video. But then there's all kinds of cool things too, especially for a teacher. You can actually like insert your own what I'm trying to say, narration. So if there's a point where you want to stop it and say, okay, pay close attention to this point right here, you
Wow.
can put that in there. So Ed Puzzle, I would say Flipgrid and Ed Puzzle are a couple cool sites to check out as far as like educational technology stuff. Those are kind of two big ones that I've been really impressed with recently as far as some things you can do with it.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. And Stacy, because I do know you pretty well and I know your family, I would definitely recommend Story of the World for you, because that is a really that just fits with your family really well. You may not go as fast as the Story of the World wants you to go, but that's totally fine. So, and we can talk more about that later. But awesome, Jared. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am so excited about bringing this awesome Daily Bellringer resource to everybody. And I know that you are going to be in a history camp run by
Oh,
the In the Pursuit of History, and I looked it up and we're totally signing up, because that I asked my son, I asked Kenyon, if do you want to do a history camp, that's online, and you get to go, they're going to do the interview or all these different sites and field trips and stuff, and he was like, yes.
yeah, it's a really cool. I was just looking at some of, they're going to have like, basically it's a history camp that is going to be completely virtual. And so, I'm going to be there as part of it, but they're going to be having like some really cool, like field trips. Like for one,
Wow.
they're going to Lincoln's home. I mean, I've been to Lincoln's home countless times in Springfield, Illinois. They're going to be doing a tour of Lincoln's home and kind of showing some things that the normal tours don't get to see. And then also, I think they're going to, what is it? Buckman's Tavern, where all the Minutemen waited at during, at the Battle of Lexington. They're going to be doing that. And I believe they have the Fort Ticonderoga is going to be one of them they're going to be going
Yeah.
to, and several others. So there's going to be a lot of cool, and then too, they're going to have some great speakers there too, that are really the guys that are really the experts in history, not like guys like me. I mean, they're really the experts. They're the ones that I look to be like, okay, what actually happened here? So yeah, it's a really cool event. So History Camp, I believe it's historycamp.org is the website. And again, it's through the Pursuit of History. So if you're interested in that, yeah, definitely check it out. It's going to be a cool event. July 10th is when that's taking place.
That is a very cool event, and I'm excited about it. Thank you so much for taking time out in your nighttime, and I appreciate that. And I'm super excited about everybody being able to use the Daily Bellringer. And let us know in the comments as you're looking through all this stuff and you're looking on the YouTube page and on his website and everything. Let us know how you're using it. I know Jared would really appreciate that, and to help give him some feedback on how other people might be using his information. And it definitely would be great for all of our community as well. So share how you're using it, how you think you might use it, and what you think about this. Obviously, if you have comments or questions about the Daily Bellringer, about history, about Freedom Scholar, whatever, put it in the comments and we will definitely get back to you. So awesome, guys. I'm so excited that we were with you tonight, and thanks for joining us. If you're watching on a replay, thanks for joining us too. I will see you guys next week on Live with Cami.